Greetings, everyone from Los Angeles. My name is Jenny Nevoso. I am the Executive Director of the Italy America Chamber of Commerce West, the official Italian Chamber of Commerce for the Western United States, a nonprofit corporation that for the past 33 years has been striving to foster business and trade opportunities between Italy and the West Coast of the United States. From member promotions to special government-driven campaigns, ISCCW strives to connect the markets and highlight the best that Italy has to offer. This webinar is the product of a collaboration with the Little Italy of LA, a 501c3 public benefit corporation with the mission to create a central gathering spot and highlight the lives, the language, the culture, and stories of Italians in Los Angeles. Given the large population of residents of Italian descent in the LA County, and we're talking about over 300,000 individuals, and particularly in the San Pedro area, I feel this webinar provides very useful tools and information to our community with Italian ties here in LA who wish to better understand what the process is to get their Italian citizenship. I am honored today to introduce our moderator, award-winning journalist Deborah Zara Colbill. Deborah's career has spanned from CNN, Fox 11 Los Angeles, KCAL 9 News, Turner Entertainment, and the Deborah Colbill Live, a very successful video-audio podcast. Thank you, Deborah, for joining us today. And thank you. And now I wanted to introduce our two panelists, our two experts who are actually connected with us today from Italy, both of them. ISCCW member Marco Permunian, founder of ICA, Italian Citizenship Assistance, U.S. Office Director and Attorney at Law. At ICA, Marco is responsible for assessing complicated citizenship matters, providing legal opinions, researching Italian records, and for any other issues concerning Italian citizenship law. I'm also very happy to introduce his associate, Rafael Di Furia, an Italian-American who successfully completed his Iure Sanguinis process in 2017. Rafael grew up with a strong sense of pride in his Italian heritage, knowing one day he would end up in Italy, and he did. Shortly after his recognition, Rafael relocated to northern Italy, the Veneto region, exactly, to live out his lifelong dream to return to the country of his ancestors. Rafael is now a part of ICA team as their media advisor. Deborah, I'll leave the microphone back to you. Thank you.
What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. And thank you both for joining us, Marco and Rafael. It's a pleasure to be talking to you from Italy, from Los Angeles. Let me start with the first question. Who qualifies for citizenship by descent? Marco, if you want to take that one.
So, of course, to qualify for citizenship by descent, you have to have an Italian ancestor, so an ancestor who was born in Italy. While there are no generational limit, so you can go back as many generations as you like, your Italian ancestor must have been still alive in 1861 when Italy was unified as a nation, even if your ancestor was no longer living in Italy, as long as he was alive, even if he was abroad. The main requirement for people to qualify for citizenship by descent is that the ancestor did not become naturalized, meaning a citizen of a foreign country, before the child of the ancestor was born in the US. So that's the most important requirement. And then the second requirement is that the ancestor did not become naturalized prior to 1912, because also that would disqualify you and would prevent you from getting Italian citizenship. There's also a difference between claiming citizenship through a male ancestor or a female ancestor. So if you're claiming citizenship through a female ancestor, you have to make sure that the child of the female ancestor was born after 1948. even if it's possible to claim citizenship, even in a situation where the child of the female ancestor was born prior to 1948, but you have to go through a court process to get Italian citizenship.
Interesting. So let's say so again, because I know I'm someone who's also looking into this, right? So if my mom was born before 1938, if I were to go through the maternal side, I would have to go to court, you're saying, to do something like that. Just
Exactly.
using myself as an example, yeah.
Which sounds like a very daunting process, but it's not. It's a very popular process. People are being successful. It's just by nature a very different process. So you cannot apply for citizenship through an Italian consulate, as most people do. You have to try to get citizenship through litigation, but most likely you'll be successful.
Good to know.
Sorry, just to add one little thing there is that, like Marco was saying, a lot of people do get frightened by the idea of having to go to court for this sort of thing. But in the end, it can actually be a very straightforward process, and sometimes even more straightforward than what some other people might go through, even including myself, having made that Iure Sanguinis claim. Right.
I mean, you've been through it. You'll, I guess, tell us about your journey in a little bit, but I'm not even sure if you went through court to do this, but no?
No, I went through a consulate in the end.
You did? Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit. In fact, I think the next question is also for Marco. What if your Italian relative renounced their Italian citizenship when they became an American citizen? Again, this is what my father's father did. So I'm curious what your answer is.
There is a lot of confusion around that. So basically, when the Italian-born ancestor became naturalized, meaning when he became or she became a citizen of the country where he or she emigrated, that's when the Italian ancestor renounced Italian citizenship. So even if the Italian ancestor wasn't aware that by becoming a citizen of a foreign country was renouncing Italian citizenship, that happened anyways. So the acquisition of a foreign citizenship by naturalization, so the voluntary acquisition of another citizenship, caused the loss of Italian citizenship. And because citizenship in Italy under Italian law is passed from parent to child, that's why it's important that the Italian immigrant was not yet naturalized when the child was born in a foreign country.
Right. Yeah, you have to do a little bit of digging to determine that, but that makes sense. I understand that. There's a law stating that women could only pass their citizenship to children born after 1948. How does this affect those applying for citizenship from their maternal side?
Yeah, we kind of talked about that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So basically, if you're using a female ancestor who could be the person who actually emigrated from Italy to the US, or even someone born in the US to Italian parents. So if that person is a female, if the child was born prior to 1948, that means that the child was born when Italy was still not allowing women to transfer their Italian citizenship onto their children. Things changed when the Italian Constitution came into effect. The Italian Constitution, which was created in 1948, basically said that men and women are equal, and that's why when you apply for citizenship, if you're using a female, only if the child of the female was born after 1948, the child would have received Italian citizenship from the mother. Otherwise, if the child was born prior to 1948, only the father can be used as the person who transferred the citizenship. However, as we said before, in 2009, the Italian Supreme Court ruled against this situation because it was clearly discriminatory against women. So what the Italian court says is that women can actually pass citizenship onto their children born prior to 1948. So if your case falls in this category, you can pursue citizenship and be successful through the court system.
Good to know. I asked you earlier, I think when we weren't online, if like, for example, a grandfather denounced his citizenship completely, does it automatically mean that the wife denounced it too, or she's independent?
In some cases. So that was the case prior to 1922, at least in the US. So in the US, prior to 1922, the naturalization of the husband caused the naturalization automatically also for the wife. So the wife didn't have the ability to choose whether they wanted to become a US citizen or not. If their husbands were becoming US citizens, they were also becoming US citizens. That changed with the Cable Act, which was issued in 1922. So after 1922 in the US, the citizenship of the woman was no longer connected to the citizenship of the husband. By the way, if you have a female ancestor who became naturalized prior to 1922 because the husband became naturalized, so we have a situation where both the Italian-born ancestors, the male and the female, became naturalized, but the male actually decided to the male wanting to become naturalized, he made that decision, but the woman didn't make any decision. She didn't have any choice. She just became naturalized automatically. So if your case falls in that category, you can also challenge that in court and be successful, because you can argue that the woman never actually decided to become a US citizen. So she actually never, you can argue that she never lost her Italian citizenship.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. What is the last generation eligible for citizenship by descent? Is it a great grandparent too many generations away? You also sort of answered this earlier.
Yes, there is no generational limit. So that's also a common misconception. So a lot of people believe that you can go back to the great grandparents only. While that's the most common category, so the 90% of the people who qualify for citizenship, they qualify for citizenship through a great grandparent. That doesn't mean that there is a generational limit. So you can go back as many generations as you like. Even you can go back to a great grandparent or great great grandparent or great great grandparent, as long as the Italian-born ancestor was still alive in 1861 when Italy was unified, and of course, as long as all of the other requirements are met.
Right. Is there a language requirement for citizenship?
Another very common question. So for citizenship by descent, there is no language requirement, and there is a specific reason behind that. So when you are applying for citizenship by descent, you are actually not technically applying for citizenship, but you're applying for recognition of a birth status. So you have always been an Italian citizen since when you were born, because citizenship was passed from one generation to another. So from your great grandfather to your grandfather to your father down to you. So that makes you an Italian citizen since the moment you were born. And that's why you don't have to speak Italian, because you're not applying for naturalization. You are just applying for recognition of a status that you had since when you were born.
Right.
In fact, it's different if you are applying for citizenship through marriage or by naturalization. So for people who are married to Italian citizens, or people who apply for citizenship after having spent a certain number of years in Italy, those people, they have to speak Italian. And by the way, that's a requirement that was introduced in 2018 when the law changed. So to recap, people applying for citizenship by descent, they don't have to speak Italian. People applying for citizenship through marriage or by naturalization, meaning people that reside in Italy, they have to speak Italian.
We're going to get into that a little bit later too, because I wanted to know how long do you have to reside in Italy before you can apply for citizenship. I mean, unless you want to just answer that now, I just know that that's further down the line. But since you brought it up,
sure,
how long?
Of course, you can apply for citizenship even if you don't have any Italian ancestry, just by residing in Italy for a certain number of years. People have to reside in Italy for 10 years, so a very long time before being able to apply for citizenship by naturalization. There are some exceptions. People from the European Union, they just have to reside in Italy for 4 years. So after 4 years, they are able to apply for citizenship. And there is another very interesting exception, especially for our audience. Those people that don't qualify for Italian citizenship by descent, but have Italian ancestry, they can apply for citizenship but by naturalization after having resided in Italy for 3 years, but only if they have an Italian-born parent or grandparent. So it doesn't work if you have an Italian-born great-grandparent.
Interesting. And I guess that means you're living there and residing for those 3 years full time, right? And you're not going back and forth numerous times. You really got to be a resident, right?
Exactly.
Very
Sorry,
interesting.
just to chime in here, just coming from an American perspective, the idea of residency in Italy ends up being a little bit different than what we have in the States, because in America, basically, you can move from one place to another, and wherever you arrive is basically your new residency. Once you've set up bills and all of that, then you can show that's your proof of residency. Whereas in Italy, the residency itself is actually something that comes into play through an official means. You actually have to go to the municipality and register yourself. And then once you've made that registration with the municipality, they will send out somebody to your apartment to go and actually make sure that you live where you say you live.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. That must get complicated, though, if it comes to, you're an American, you're paying your taxes. I mean, I don't even know how that works, or is that just too technical right now to talk about?
If we're talking about American taxes as somebody living abroad, that gets into a little bit of tricky territory, because as far as I understand, the United States and Eritrea are the only countries that tax their citizens who live abroad. However, for U.S. citizens, I believe, because the numbers changed a couple times since I've lived abroad, last I remember it was about $100,000 is where kind of there's this cutoff point that you don't really actually have to pay. But there are also agreements between the U.S. and Italy so that you don't have double taxation. Sometimes if one tax would be more, maybe you pay the difference between the two. But if you're an Italian citizen living in the United States, then this is a whole different case, and Italy doesn't actually end up taxing its citizens who live abroad.
Okay, that's a good one. Where can people, apply for their citizenship? What documents are required, Marco, if you want to take that one on?
People can apply for citizenship through an Italian consulate. So the vast majority of my clients, they apply for citizenship through an Italian consulate. There are a few Italian consulates in the US in major cities, and you have to apply for citizenship at the consulate that has jurisdiction over the state where you reside. For example, the Italian consulate in Los Angeles has jurisdiction over Southern California, the state of Nevada, Arizona. It's actually a very large jurisdiction. In fact, the Italian consulate in Los Angeles is one of the consulates that has the longest wait time for an appointment at the citizenship office. But anyways, you apply for citizenship through an Italian consulate, or you can relocate to Italy with the purpose of applying for Italian citizenship, and that will make the process a little bit quicker. So you have two options. You apply through your local Italian consulate, or you apply directly in Italy, but if you're willing to relocate to Italy. As for the documents required, those are mainly documents to prove your lineage. So you need all of the birth, marriage, and death certificates, as well as the naturalization records for your Italian-born ancestor. Some consulates also require documentation for the spouses of the individuals in your Italian line. All of these documents, they need to be obtained, legalized, translated into Italian, and that's a very complex process. It takes several months to put all of these documents together, especially if you have to do research to locate these documents. Once you have all your documents, you can just go to your local Italian consulate and apply for citizenship. Of course, given the long wait time for an appointment at certain consulates, it's best to secure your appointment at the citizenship office before you start gathering the documents needed for the process.
And let's say again that it's a grandparent that was born in Italy. Do you then also need all the paperwork for your parents who may have been born in the U.S. or another country? So you need everyone's documents, right?
Correct. Yes.
Where do you start? Should you get a lawyer? Should you get someone like yourself to help them? Do you suggest people sort of do a lot of the legwork on their own? And is it very costly?
So it is not necessary to get a lawyer to go through the citizenship process. In my opinion, having a lawyer is highly advisable. The process is much, much more complicated than people believe. It's very time consuming. You need to be very detailed oriented to go through this process. The Italian consulates, they process so many citizenship applications. By the way, there is a huge interest in applying for Italian citizenship, which is a good thing, but that makes the process very complex because the consulates, they don't have the time to help you out with the process.
Right.
They're also going to be very picky and very demanding. So everything needs to be prepared with extreme care and attention, and it takes a lot of time. So if you have the time and the expertise, if you did your own research, you can go through the process by yourself, but normally people don't know how to go through the process by themselves. And that's why getting an attorney is probably, in most cases, the best choice. As for the cost, besides the actual cost of the documentation that you have to acquire, also documents, legalizations, translations, you of course have to pay an attorney, and the cost of the attorney will vary depending on how good the attorney is and what you want from the attorney. You can also do some of the legwork yourself and then just hand over your case to the attorney when you can no longer continue by yourself.
That's one thing that actually Marco and his team, I just have to say, do a really great job with, because I've met some of his clients that he's worked with, and what some of them have chosen to do is they'll do that legwork on their own, and they end up finding that good balance that works just well enough for them.
Yeah. Would you advise presenting all of your Italian relatives? Let's say you have 4 grandparents who came from Italy. Would you give them everything or just do one at a time?
So normally people use just one side of the family to apply for citizenship, and normally there is one side of the family that is better than the other. So easier to go through, especially if there are name changes or very many discrepancies in the documents that you have to use. It's better to just not use that line and focus on the other.
Mm-hmm. If you do speak Italian and go to Italy to complete the application process, though, is that faster? You brought that up earlier, but is that a faster way to go? And then how long are you there for? Is it the full 3 years, or is it expedited if you decide to go there for this purpose alone?
So it is definitely a quicker process. You don't have to stay in Italy for 3 years because that's a different issue. That's for people who want to apply for citizenship by residing in Italy, so people who don't qualify for citizenship by descent. Instead, the people who qualify for citizenship by descent and don't want to apply through a consulate because it's the process is too long for them, what they can do is, once they have gathered all of the necessary documents, they can travel to Italy with the purpose of applying for Italian citizenship. So they would be relocating to Italy. They file the application in Italy, and they are granted a residency permit, which will allow them to reside in Italy throughout the process. The advantage of applying for citizenship in Italy is that you don't have to wait for an appointment at the consulate. So whenever you have your documents together, you can just go to Italy and start the process. The downside, if you will, is that you have to stay in Italy for the entire duration of the process, which normally takes, say, between 6 and 9 months.
That sounds good to me. What are the benefits? And I know there's many of them. What are the benefits and also the downsides of Italian citizenship?
So there aren't really any downsides, but we can talk about that in a second.
Just you have to eat copious amounts of pizza and pasta, and that's about it.
Yeah, I can't think of any, but go ahead. I've got lots of pluses. So go ahead.
So benefits, free movement in the European Union, easier access to employment opportunities. Of course, if you want to be employed by a European company, you don't have to get a visa, so it's easier for the company to hire you if you have dual citizenship. Healthcare. So as we all know, it's free for Italian citizens, or almost free of charge, but relatively inexpensive, especially in comparison to the US healthcare system. And a lot of people don't know that the Italian healthcare system is one of the best in the world. Then I'd say lower tuitions. So if you're a student, as for the downsides, taxation is the only thing you should be concerned about, but only if you're going to live in Italy and if you're gonna have an income in Italy. So it's only if you become a dual citizen, relocate to Italy, and also have an income in Italy. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about taxation.
It's also easier, isn't it? Like if you're purchasing property and also voting. Do you have voting privileges as well?
Of course, right? Yes. Yeah, you can vote for the Italian parliament and the European one as well. And it's easier to purchase properties. Anybody can purchase properties in Italy, but if you're an Italian citizen, there are certain benefits, including a tax discount.
Right. Is there such a thing as citizenship by residency? You answered that. And you also answered, how long do you live there? And you said 3 years, right? So we covered that one. Raphael, we finally have a question for you here. Why was it that you wanted to even get your Italian citizenship in the first place and move to Italy? Tell us a little bit quickly about your story. We'd love to hear it.
So it's a bit of a long story, but basically, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version.
Why not?
Growing up, my grandfather was a huge influence on my life. His family was the Italian line in my family, and growing up, he always told me these beautiful stories of growing up and like crushing grapes with his feet. Even he had a horrible injury as a child from crushing grapes, and he had like one finger that had like a little bit of a mark, whatever, it doesn't even matter. But he was
those are the stories, they stay with you, right?
From
when you hear them.
It was the type of thing, like I would sit on his lap and he would just tell me about like these beautiful things. And basically growing up, my grandfather was my father figure in my life. And so this Italian pride, this Italian heritage was very much a part of me, who I am, what I am. And like, even with my cousins, if you ask any of us, because we're all a little mixed Italian and other things in there, if you ask any of us, like, what are you? Italian, just because of our grandfather. It's just that somehow that came before everything. And sorry?
I get it.
Yeah, no, it's just, I don't know how it is. I know plenty of people who are like half Italian, half Irish, whatever it is. Always the Italian ends up being like a bit more, somehow that's that happy feeling inside. Anyway, so moving forward, when I was about 12, my family, they had already been talking about relocating to Europe for work anyway. And I just happened to be in the living room one day, the evening news was on, and I heard about Irish citizenship and the potential for people of Irish descent to get that. And so just as a kid, my first thought was like, oh, well, if the Irish can do it, then why can't Italians? In general, most countries aren't like this, but it just so happens that Italy just so happens to be a country where you can get citizenship through descent with actually a lot more relaxed rules than the Irish process. And so it didn't really take much for me to go and say to my mom, hey, so you want to look into this thing? Can we do this? Like, is this possible? And she's like, she kind of took it over, and I ended up doing a lot of research, even at that young age. And we started going through that, and it just somehow, even from younger than that, it always was just this natural thing that one day I would end up in Italy. So moving forward, I was getting to a point where I hadn't arrived here in Italy, and it was just like this thing that kept eating away at me, to be able to experience this country that my family is from, to get to know better what my background is, because this in America is something that we very much miss. There's always this thing about this faraway place over there with those people that used to live in that time, in that place, and that thing. Just, it's words on paper. It's nothing really tangible. So also, having visited Italy, I saw that once you came here, there's just something different about learning things from a history book. And so moving here became very important to me, to explore that even further and to be able to make a life here for myself.
How many years have you been there?
So far, I've been here, I want to say 3 years and a couple months.
And loving every minute, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What has been the biggest impact on your life, Raphael, having this dual citizenship, other than the wonderful feel of being Italian and being a resident of Italy?
Right. No, there's a lot more than just the happy, fluffy unicorns and rainbows and butterflies. From a tangible aspect, I had been living abroad already for a number of years before moving to Italy. And so for me, not having to go through a visa process every year, every other year, and having to wonder, is the life that I'm building in this place, is that all just going to float away if my visa application doesn't get accepted? And so having Italian citizenship, I just can exist. It's just like, after living abroad for so long, worrying about visa, I finally felt like, okay, now I can kind of relax a little bit. I can settle into life. I can finally maybe purchase some tools, because I like doing woodworking. And so I can finally purchase some things that I wouldn't have to take with me from place to place. And to be able to work here legally and to be able to make that happen, even like as Marco was saying about the concern about working here in Italy as an American with Italian citizenship, it actually ends up being, there's a lot to learn, but in the end, it's not as complicated of a process as you might think, especially if you can find some really knowledgeable accountants to be able to help you along the process. So for me to be able to have the option to stay here in Italy, and also even here, I have a tax code which allows me to work with other European Union countries and be able to legally have the ability to actually accept payment from them, or to issue whatever, to be able to do business within the European Union, is a huge benefit as someone who works with businesses to help them with their media interests.
You know, you said something interesting. It's not as daunting, I think, as some people imagine it to be. And I think once you start the process, it's just not so bad, especially when you have someone like Marco that you can contact. Definitely. A little bit of help. I'll be contacting him myself. But once you get going on it, it's well worth it, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even with me, I did the process DIY. At times I had help to get a few documents here and there, but in the end, I did most of the work. But looking back on things now, I really wish I had had Marco and the whole team at Italian Citizenship Assistance. Even when Marco and I first started to talk to each other, just to get to know each other as friends first, I kept saying to him, man, wow, I really wish I had known about you. I wish you had even had been around when I had first started this years ago, because doing it on your own, even like Marco was saying, there's a lot of little details. And unfortunately, if you're not well versed in how these types of processes work, and even if you are well versed in another system, that doesn't mean you'll be able to really get through the system here very well. And especially once you have to work with the Italian documents and all of the various pieces of the puzzle. So really, it makes a huge difference at the end of the day. And even on my YouTube channel that I have talking about life in Italy, it's something that I really am I have a very strong opinion about this, and that if I were to do it again, I would definitely use somebody like Marco, and I would never consider to do a DIY.
Yeah, Very interesting. In fact, one of the questions was, did you find it difficult? Which you did answer. So, you know, you would prefer to use someone like Marco. It would be a little easier, but you managed to navigate it nonetheless, because here you are.
So I had a lot of, that was the thing, by doing it by myself, that actually created a lot of problems, because the information available, especially then, was not so great, which is one of the reasons why Marco and I now do a podcast, to try and help educate people on how to get through this process and to let them in behind the scenes a little bit more.
That's great. Well, now that you've got both, the American passport, the Italian passport, are there any differences when you're traveling? Is it easier? And do you tend to use one passport more than the other? I could imagine that when you're European Union, you use your Italian passport, or, you know, getting into Italy, clearly that goes without saying. But
yeah, even if I were to travel, so even if I were to travel abroad at this point, I actually would probably be more likely to use my Italian passport than my American passport. One, because there are a lot more countries that are friendly with Italy, and there are also not maybe, but there are a number of countries that you can travel to visa-free, or that you don't. There's different relationships with each country, but even traveling within Europe, it's at the point where if I wanted to go to another country, like I have family that live in Spain, and I was there in January just before the lockdowns, and basically all I had to show was my Italian ID card. I didn't even have to show a passport, nothing. It was very, very simple and very, very easy. Traveling as an Italian citizen really has a lot of benefits, and it's traveling as an American, I found that in some countries you do get looks, or you do draw attention to yourself that you may not want at times, whereas with Italy, everybody loves Italy.
Everybody loves Italians. So what's the name of your podcast, gentlemen?
We do two podcasts now. We have the Italian Real Estate Podcast and the Italian Citizenship Podcast that are both on Marco's YouTube channel, youtube.com/Italian Citizenship Assistance. And then I also do a podcast on my own, youtube.com/Rafael Di Furia.
Beautiful. I believe now I'm kicking it back to Jenny, but is there anything else that either of you would like to add that we didn't ask Marco or Rafael? We'd love to hear about it.
All I've got to say is that it is very much worth considering getting Italian citizenship, even if you never personally move to Italy yourself. It is something that will help open the door for your children or their children, because it's more than just some papers. It's a full legacy that it gives you. It's something tangible to hold on to.
I was going to say that it's a legacy, as Rafael just said, for your children, because even if you have to go through this very difficult process, your children, even your future children, will not have to. They will become Italian citizens if you are an Italian citizen already.
Because once you're an Italian citizen, once they're born, do you just register them right at the beginning, right as soon as they're born? Whereas with your process, because as Marco has said in our podcast a number of times, basically the Iure Sanguinis process comes down to a delayed birth registration. So there's a few more pieces to the puzzle, because you do have to add in those the missing documents from missing generations. So you've already done all the legwork. By the time your child is born, it's just a walk in the park for them.
Yeah, I have felt it myself my whole life, but also after going back and meeting all of my relatives where they're from, just not even 2 years ago, and I thought I belong here. So I completely understand how you feel, Rafael. You belong here.
Yeah, there's just something that pulls you. Once you get here, you can't verbalize it. It's just a feeling that you know once you know it, once you feel it.
I'm not sure. There was another question, although it wasn't on this sheet. It was on a previous sheet. So if I have a moment, I'll ask. Is there any mandatory military service if you get an Italian citizenship for your son or daughter to serve?
No. There is no military service for anybody. So if you're an Italian citizen, if you become an Italian citizen, you don't have to serve in the military, regardless of your age.
Yeah, that was something that they abolished quite a while ago.
Yeah.
In the year 2000.
Very interesting. Marco, do you have any parting words you'd love to tell anyone? Any advice you'd like to give people like myself, or the many people that I'm sure are watching this?
Yeah, more and more people are becoming interested in getting Italian citizenship. So now it is the right time, because processing times and waiting times, they're increasing a little bit. So because of the increasing interest in applying for Italian citizenship. So now is really the perfect time to start the process.
Yeah. Well, thank you both, gentlemen, very, very much. Very interesting hour. And Jenny, I'm going to kick it back to you if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Thank you, Deborah. In closing, I wanted to thank all of you. Deborah, thank you so much for moderating this panel. And Marco and Rafael, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your personal experience, Rafael. Very interesting. And I do hope that this content, this webinar was very useful for the ones watching and following. And please feel free to contact us with any questions. We'll pass them on to our experts. Our info box is info@iaccw.net. Again, it's info@iaccw.net. We look forward to connecting soon. Thank you so much. Grazie a tutti.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.